The movie begins with Connie and Clifford's wedding. Connie is now happily married to a fellow aristocrat and soldier, Clifford Chatterley. Soon after, we see Connie giggling away with her sister Hilda until her new husband comes and gets her for the celebrations. After celebrating their marriage with their loved ones, Connie and Clifford retire to bed. Later that night, Connie asks her husband if he desires children someday, and Clifford says yes. A few days later, the newly married couple is separated when Clifford has to go fight in the war. But when he returns, Clifford is no longer the same man. A few months later, Connie and Clifford shift to a manor in the countryside of Ragby, owned by the Chatterleys. And here we see how the war left Clifford a handicapped man. As the manor had been closed for long, Clifford gave orders to hire new workers for the upkeep. When Connie walks into the manor, she's mesmerized by its raw beauty. She promises Clifford that they'll bring the manor back to back. Due to his condition, Clifford happily takes the ground floor and lets Connie have the second floor to herself. Connie ventures into the manor and finds herself a room of her liking. Later that night, as Connie dresses him up for bed, Clifford expresses his want to become a writer and asks Connie to be his editor. Connie is happy to assist him in any way possible. However, there is one thing that bothers her. Clifford can no longer satisfy her in the way she truly desires. But Connie tries to make her peace with that to be a good wife to Clifford. Soon, the Chatterleys begin hiring new people for their manor. One among them is a gamekeeper named Oliver Mellors. He used to work for Clifford's father before he left to become a lieutenant in the army. Now that he's back, he wants to resume working at the manor. Clifford happily hires the man. As the days pass, Connie writes to her sister about her time at Ragby. She tells her about how Clifford has been getting better day by day, and how he spends most of his time writing. When he's not doing that, he's throwing parties and inviting old friends. Meanwhile, her friends seem to have broken all contact with her ever since Clifford's accident. Even still, she writes that she misses London and the noise of the city. When one day, bored of her monotonous life at the manor, Connie asks Clifford if she could visit her sister in London. But the man refuses to let her go because he doesn't want to be left alone. He suggests she rather call her sister. Upset by his refusal, Connie decides to take a walk alone. But even then, Clifford suggests she have someone else run errands for her if she needs to. Connie is bothered by Clifford trying to control every aspect of her life. She walks out of there, and while exploring the estate, she finds a small stream a little further down. She spends some time there and plays with a stranger's dog. Soon she finds out that the dog belongs to Oliver. When she returns home, Connie helps Clifford into the bath and tells him about the stream she found. She wishes that they should both go down there sometime, but Clifford doesn't show any interest. Later, he suggests that she should go into the village and see the fair on May Day. Even though she agrees, Connie seems a little disappointed as she leaves because she was expecting him to go out with her. As Connie ventures into the town amid the fair, she meets a school teacher named Mrs. Flint. They two hit it off at once and begin a friendship. Just then, a group of miners rush into the street, protesting, and almost stampede over a scared Connie, who then finds out from Mrs. Flint protesting miners are a common occurrence here. One afternoon, when Connie's talking Clifford out, they run into some trouble with his wheelchair in the field. But luckily, Oliver shows up just in time and helps Clifford out. When they reach their destination, while expressing his love for the woods of his boyhood, Clifford tells Connie much he wishes to preserve these for the sake of his homeland. It is at this place that the fact that he can't have a son burdens him, and so he suggests that Connie should have won with another man. At first, Connie thinks that he is joking, but Clifford seems to be serious. He doesn't think the mechanical act of creating a child will outweigh their love for each other. He urges Connie to have a son with another man, and they can tell the world that it was Clifford who fathered him. Clifford tells her that he doesn't care who the father will be so long as he is someone appropriate enough. Connie is taken aback by his suggestion but doesn't refute it, though it deeply disturbs her that he would even suggest such a thing. At one of Clifford's parties, an Irish playwright makes a move on Connie, and Clifford sees it. The next day he makes it clear to her that they will not be inviting that man to their parties again since he doesn't seem to be right, though his concern is not for Connie's sake, just as nothing seems to be of late. When Connie tells him that she doesn't feel well, and hasn't been since their conversation the other day, Clifford changes the topic and goes on to read the newspaper. Connie storms out of there in anger. Entering her room, she starts clipping away at the pictures of the ancestors donning the walls of her room and cries in frustration. Soon after, Hilda arrives and finds Connie in a state of despair. When confronted about Connie's ill state, Clifford remains unbothered. Hilda puts her foot down, reminding the man that Connie is his wife and not his servant. Not leaving him much choice, she tells them she will take Connie to a doctor she trusts, and in the meantime, Clifford should hire back the caretaker from his boyhood, Mrs. Bolton. Soon, Mrs. Bolton is hired and Connie makes her acquaintance. Mrs. Bolton seems like a kind lady, and while talking to her, Connie finds out that Mrs. Bolton's husband Ted was a miner who had passed away 3 years into their marriage. After the introductions are made, before she leaves on her walk, Clifford requests Connie to ask the gamekeeper if the pheasants have begun laying. So Connie heads to the gamekeeper's cottage, and there she stumbles upon Oliver taking a bath outside. Connie hides until he's back inside and goes knocking on his door. While Oliver seems surprised to see her, he lets her inside and Connie's eyes roam all over his cottage. She finds it quite charming and after inquiring about the pheasants, she lays eyes on a book she loves. Oliver tells her that he's somewhat of a reader and it is a trait that suits his solitary life. Soon after, Connie leaves. She goes to the village and meets with Mrs. Flint, giving her flowers that she plucked from outside the cottage. As she gets talking to the woman, Connie asks her more about Oliver and finds out that even Mrs. Flint seems to think of him as a kind man. But Connie wonders why he is still alone, and Mrs. Flint tells her about his wife, Bertha, who cheated on him while he was away at war. The whole village found out about it and poor Oliver was made into a laughingstock. While they aren't divorced, Connie finds that Bertha stays with one of her loves now, so poor Oliver is a loner. The next day, Connie is updated on Clifford's condition by Mrs. Bolton. Seeing as Clifford is busy being busy and alone and bored, Connie ventures into the woods and runs into Oliver at a small hut who is prepping new coops for the chicks. Connie takes a seat inside the hut and finds that she likes it there and Oliver isn't the only reason why. Oliver, too, glances longing at the lady while she isn't looking. When it's time to leave, Connie asks if she could get a spare key for the hut and her demand takes Oliver by surprise. He doesn't think there might be another but tells her he'll look into it. Connie rushes back home. She arrives a little late for the tea with Clifford for which he's been waiting long. Clifford's annoyed behavior annoys Connie further. She then asks him for a spare key for the hut as she would like to sit and read there sometimes. When Clifford asks if she saw Oliver at the hut, Connie remarks that maybe the man didn't like her intrusion into his space, though she's proven wrong a few days later when she visits the hut. Oliver arrives there, and seeing her sitting outside, he hands her his key. As the days go by, Connie starts spending more and more time at the hut. Meanwhile, Clifford remains occupied with his matters. One day, after the chicks have started hatching, Connie excitedly rushes to tell her husband, whose lack of expression disappoints her. Mrs. Bolton tells Clifford about how most people have left Tevershall now that the coal has run thin, and it won't be long before the town's finished. This news piques Clifford's interest as the landowner, and he asks the woman to arrange for dinner with the mine's manager, Mr. Linley. At the dinner, Clifford decides to drop his writer's hat and save the sinking ship that the mine in Tevershall. When Connie opposes his decision, Clifford disregards it. Bothered and frustrated, Connie storms out of there and arrives at the hut where she finds Oliver working. With his help, Connie holds one of the chicks but is overwhelmed by her emotions. She soon starts shaking and sobbing. When Oliver sees this, he tries to help her calm down, but Connie hugs him instead and Oliver lets her cry her heart out. And in the heat of the moment, Connie is attracted to Oliver and the two of them end up sleeping together. When it's over, Oliver walks Connie back to the estate, and the two part ways without ever discussing what happened. When Connie gets back home, she finds that the dinner is over and Clifford, who is still busy with his pursuits, never even noticed that his wife had been gone most of the night. The next day, Connie arrives at the hut and waits for Oliver. When he sees her there, the man doesn't seem too happy. He feels as though Connie is lowering himself to be with her husband's gamekeeper, but Connie doesn't seem to care as she kisses the man. The two start right where they left off. When it's time for Connie to leave, Oliver sends her back with a kiss and a promise to come to his cottage the next day. At dinner, Clifford goes on and on about how he needs an heir to run the mines after him, but Connie is lost in thoughts of Oliver. Later, she writes to her sister about how she has felt her heart opening once again. Out and about in the village, Connie runs into Oliver at Mrs. Flint's where the two women talk about motherhood. When Connie sees Oliver, she gets a little uncomfortable. When he tries to touch her, she finches away. Her odd behavior bothers the man. As she leaves there, he follows her and the two arrive at the woods. She tells him she only flinched because they could have been caught. Oliver insists that she come to the cottage with him, and despite her protests, Connie is weak to his charms. The two end up having a passionate rendezvous in the woods, and when Oliver walks her back, Connie realizes that she had been so lonely up until he came along. Connie returns home, a woman madly in love. Connie and Oliver spend their days making memories and falling in love with each other. But one day, Connie feels something is off, that she might be pregnant. While sitting with Mrs. Bolton one evening, the ladies talk about love and Mrs. Bolton tells Connie about her husband Ted who passed away 25 years ago. It is evident on Connie's face when Mrs. Bolton speaks of love, how much she loves Oliver now. While they're still talking, Connie slips into the conversation that there still might be hope for her and Clifford on the family front, and she might have a child soon. One morning, while tending to a sick Clifford, Mrs. Bolton sees the gamekeeper lurking outside and she looks rather suspicious. She attempts to tell Clifford the same, but the man is the least concerned about anything that isn't the mines. Meanwhile, Mrs. Bolton does as expected and tells the gossip maids all about what Connie told her earlier. There still might be hope for the Chatterleys in that department. Soon, the gossip churns through the mill and is soon heard by Clifford. When Clifford realizes that everyone thinks he's still very much virile, he seems to be the happiest man ever. Soon after, he confronts Connie about the rumor that there will soon be an heir to Ragby, and Connie tells him that there might be. She plans on going to Venice with her father and her sister for 3 weeks, where she will find a man to father their child in secret, and no one will find out the truth but them. Clifford doesn't seem a single bit disturbed by this and instead only asks if she would return to him, to which Connie says yes, and the man couldn't be happier. All he asks for is not to know the name of the man, and Connie agrees. Later, when she meets with Oliver, she tells him about her travel plans. She goes on to tell him that she told Clifford she might have a child and she suspects she might already be expecting. When Oliver finds out about Clifford and Connie's plan, he's enraged and hurt. He wonders if this is the reason why Connie slept with him in the first place. She tries to assure him that that isn't the case and that she never planned on any of this, but Oliver, feeling betrayed and used by her, doesn't believe that. One day, while on another one of their walks, Clifford's new motor chair breaks down in the middle of the field. Connie tries to help him but is too weak to move the chair. While passing them by, Oliver stops to help them. He pushes the chair up the hill and the fumes from the motor hurt his lungs. Clifford ridicules the man for coughing, and his callousness and superior attitude bothers Connie. She tries to help Oliver push the chair. Though he is mad at her, Connie tries to kiss him to make sure he's okay, but Oliver pulls away and leaves. Clifford's behavior enrages Connie and she screams at him later when they return home, calling him out on his god complex and superior behavior, which is nothing more than bullying. Tormented, Connie turns up at Oliver's cottage and apologizes to him for hurting him. She tells him that she doesn't want a child over him, she only wants him. But she has to keep up the pretense for Clifford to believe that she tried to save their marriage or else he wouldn't divorce her. Connie makes Oliver believe that she loves only him. As the two of them reconcile, Oliver tells Connie about his wife, who often sends her drunk lover to his house to demand his war pension. Connie wishes that they both could just leave this place and take their family of 3 somewhere safe. Soon, it starts raining and Connie strips down and runs out in the rain excitedly. Seeing her wild and carefree, Oliver follows her too. The two run around outside the cottage, soaking in the rain, wild. When it is over, Oliver takes Connie back to the manor, where they are found kissing by Mrs. Bolton. They quickly part ways, and Connie gets mad at Clifford for sending Mrs. Bolton to look for her. When she returns home, Clifford is aghast to see her state, drenched and practically bare, but Connie doesn't care what he says. Very soon, Hilda arrives to pick up Connie for their trip to Venice. Connie takes her to her room and tells Hilda all about the man she's in love with. But when Hilda discovers he is the gamekeeper and one of Clifford's servants, she refuses to accept this relationship for her sister. Her refusal to understand upsets Connie, and she makes it clear to her sister that she will stay one night with Oliver before leaving for Venice the next day. When the night falls, Hilda and Connie arrive at Oliver's cottage. But Hilda doesn't shy away from expressing her refusal of their relationship. She asks Oliver how he'd take care of Connie once he loses his job. She wonders if he seriously believes he can give her a chance at happiness. Oliver tells her that all he knows is he gets a great deal of happiness from Connie, and that's all that matters. Hilda taunts him for being selfish and only thinking of his happiness. She leaves with the parting thought that Oliver should reflect on his actions. Connie apologizes to him for her sister's rude words and behaviors, but Oliver, too, thinks that Hilda is right. What happens when Clifford fights the divorce to keep their child? Oliver and Connie leave the worries to tomorrow as they spend another passionate night together. Early in the morning, Ned, Bertha's lover, knocks on Oliver's door, demanding his war pension. Oliver gets Connie to hide and sends Ned away. After kissing him goodbye, Connie gets in Hilda's car, who's waiting for her, and leaves. But not before Mrs. Flint sees her drive away from the back road that leads up to the cottage. Oliver does his best to burn any evidence of Connie being there. Back in London, a worried Connie tells Hilda that she is pregnant. She doesn't know how long she can carry on the pretense with Clifford. When her father overhears this, Connie tells him that she is in love with another man. The old man advises her that she can please herself with whoever she wants. Lovers come and go, but she should hold on to Clifford and Ragby. Meanwhile, Ned breaks into Oliver's cottage and finds the silk nightcloth and Connie's book. Soon, the rumors start to spread. Ned blabbers on about it to the men over drinks, and soon, through the grapevine, it reaches Clifford. When Mrs. Bolton overhears Clifford plotting against Oliver, she rushes to make a call to Connie. Very soon, Clifford sends for Oliver and he arrives at the manor only to be greeted by Mrs. Bolton outside. She informs the man that Connie will soon be arriving and she has asked him to meet her at the hut so that they can decide what to do next. While he's thankful for her help, Oliver warns Mrs. Bolton that she should steer clear of the dark days coming ahead. When Oliver arrives in Clifford's office, the man confronts him about the book with Connie's name found in his cottage. Obvious as it is about their affair, Clifford gives Oliver an ultimatum to wind up his stuff and leave before dusk, warning him to never set foot on his land again. When Connie arrives at the village and asks Mrs. Flint for Oliver's whereabouts, the woman refuses to talk to her. Connie runs to the hut and finds Oliver waiting there. The two reunite, kissing passionately. It is then that Connie sees the packed bags. Oliver tells her that he will have to leave now that the cat's out of the bag. Connie begs him to run away with her, but Oliver can't. He has nothing to offer her. Connie argues that he is everything to her, but when a commotion outside scares him, Oliver hides her. Connie makes him promise her that the two of them will share their lives, and Oliver swears to find her when the time comes. Heartbroken and defeated, Connie and Oliver part ways. A dejected Connie returns to the manor and confronts Clifford. After all, this was his idea. But Clifford refuses to accept that he ever allowed her to bed a man like Oliver. When Connie tells him that she's going to have Oliver's child, Clifford refuses to claim that child is his, especially after the rumors. But Connie isn't expecting him to do so because she wants a divorce. Her words leave Clifford in shock. He never expected this to happen, and when Connie tells him that she's been very unhappy in this marriage for a long time, Clifford seems to have been clueless about it. Connie tells him that she tried to follow all the rules that he laid out, and she tried to support him in every way she could, but he couldn't give her the slightest drop of affection in return. Instead, he made her feel ashamed for wanting those things. Clifford seems lost in this conversation. He declares that he loves her and he's given her everything that he could have. He asks her for a chance so he could prove that he cares and loves her, and Connie asks him to let her go. But this is too big of a demand from her. Though he lets her go, Clifford bitterly tells her that he will never grant her a divorce. As Connie walks out of there, Mrs. Bolton tries to console her. Connie asks the woman if she could pass along any news of Oliver to her. Mrs. Bolton asks her why she wants it, and Connie tells her that she loves him. As she's leaving, Mrs. Bolton tells her that she hopes she finds her man. Connie is grateful for the woman's blessing. Days pass, and Connie arrives in Venice, and every day, she waits to hear from Oliver. When the maids start to gossip about Connie and badmouth her, Mrs. Bolton stands up for her and tells all the ladies that Connie walked out of her marriage and left her position and all her wealth for the man she loved. She warns the ladies to never speak ill of the lovers. Days turn into weeks and weeks into months, but Connie receives no news of Oliver. Anytime she passes by her old friends, or strangers at a party, they look at her as if she is an alien and not a pregnant woman. Sick and tired of this life, Connie waits for Oliver's word. And one day, it arrives in a letter. Hilda gives her a letter from Oliver, and Connie's burden eases. She breathes a little freely as she reads his words to her. Oliver says that the word of her departure made its way to his little cottage in Scotland where, in the pub, he heard of a woman who left her rich husband for the gamekeeper. Though no one knows of their real names, their love story carried on as a tale. In the letter, Oliver sends her his address and Connie comes looking for him. He mentions working on a farm and earning a decent living. But nothing as grand as she's used to. Though he cannot provide her with all the things she'd be giving up to be with him, he still hopes that they can be together because having her in his life gives him enough purpose to carry on. Connie reaches a small cottage, which is nothing compared to the riches and comforts she is used to, but she doesn't care about any of that. She searches everywhere for Oliver, and at last, the two find each other.